You're listening to the Liberal Artists Podcast.
Right on KX 2994.5 radio.
Nah, I'm just trying to have fun, because when Bo's away, the kids will play. My name is Andy Gibby Gibson. I am your temporary host for today, and I'm going to be speaking entirely in radio this whole time. I am joined on the hot mic by my good compadre, Kaylie.
Gibby, I'm gonna need you to roll for initiative.
Yeah, there it is. There's that cheeky thing that I usually do where I vaguely reference or sometimes directly reference the topic for the episode. You're stealing my bit. This is gimmick infringement, and I will not forgive it. But we have a special guest today, filling in our third man in the booth right here, coming up on deck. We have the man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour. He is a doctoral candidate over at a school way up in the north, probably in, I don't know, Maine or Canada or something like that. And his name is Ian.
Good evening. I do have to point out, for the record, that I am still a doctoral student, not a candidate yet, as I have not passed my comprehensive exams, though I will in months.
You don't actually have to be factual to be on the radio. You just have to get paid to do
I appreciate it.
Yes,
We're
indeed.
getting paid for this?
Maybe you're not, but no. I'm just kidding. We don't make money from this. This is podcast, not radio, after all. But
I'm just the soundboard today, I've realized.
we should just turn this entirely into like bad FM radio. Like, this is the morning zoo.
I will just make a series of sound bites that we can just plug into the editing, and you can just use at random as you like.
We've found your true calling, not through like incredibly highbrow and introspective theater, but rather just as our sound machine. Yeah, that's why she's got a master's degree. Well, she
Not
doesn't have it yet, but she will.
You keep predicting the
Okay,
future
fair.
of these things. I still have to make and defend a thesis.
Yep, that's why they call me the Ides March. That's why they do. But, everybody calls me that. Everybody. But let me check my list for our optimal podcast content.
Yes.
Let's see. As I read over these notes on my hand.
Don't forget to pick up milk.
Ask how they're. Hey, how's it? How are you? What's going on in your life? What are you up to? What you been doing? What you been feeling?
I have been feeling joy and immense relief because the show I've been assistant directing has finally opened, so I get my life back just in time to go into finals. Yay!
Delightful.
Yay, higher education.
The clouds have parted and the sun is giving you just a delightful middle finger right to it.
Oh, it did that the other day when we went, spring rain, and it turned into snow. we are never free of it.
I'm not here to blame you guys for this, but you live in like a place that's, cold.
What?
No.
What? I'm sorry. I assumed that the hot wings would just melt away all of the snow at one point or another, but apparently that's not how science works.
That is actually how Buffalonians counter massive snow drifts. We just pile up like buffalo chicken wings on like a big snowbank after the plow has gone through, and it melts it all down completely.
But it doesn't count unless you have it with blue cheese. If you have that snow plow with ranch, it's out of here. Get the fuck out.
Do you take your
Get outta
snowplows with ranch or blue cheese, Ian?
Blue cheese, all the way. Because I want it to work.
The plow doesn't work unless it has blue cheese.
Yes, did you not just listen to the man?
Yeah, it's science. Not only that, but the handlebars inside of like the plow.
Are they made of the carrots and celery?
Yes, exactly. Like, they're not very durable.
Well-balanced diet.
Exactly. Like, you get all the major food groups. You get protein, you get vegetables, you get goo. What else do you need?
Goo. I don't like that phrase.
It was recommended on the food pyramid.
So,
Yes, 5 to 8 servings of goo daily.
No, I'm pretty sure that was the big goo lobby that put that in there, just like the grain lobby said we needed 12 servings of
not
bread a day.
big goo.
Big Goo is the most threatening lobby that Washington has ever seen. The most scary one since Big Gay stole the rainbow.
No. I am very interested, though, in this idea of, like, building, like, industrial equipment out of food. I don't know, like, to scale, or if it would be just, like, miniatures for, like, a charcuterie board or something. But I would be very curious to see what else you could build and maybe feasibly make it make sense of in construction equipment.
There's a book that we owned when I was too old for these kind of books, but my brother had it, which was Meals on Wheels or food to go, and it was just a bunch of little characters of food, all in different modes of transportation made of food. So you had like cucumber mobiles and like a watermelon like ship. Yeah, I remember nothing about it other than like food.
The infrastructure and city design of the great town of Flavortown must be respected. You think that it's all just like hair dye and like bowling shirts? No! The city council members have been there for decades, and they've been holding on with a tight grip for years. And we must rise against our oppressors using those very same celery and carrot snowplows and drive straight through City Hall, which is made out of graham crackers and icing.
It is the idea of the gingerbread village, but just taken to the extreme and with literally anything else other than gingerbread, because like
even gingerbread.
It feels like, sure, it's become its own thing like for the holidays, but it's impressive to me seeing like a giant like gingerbread village, and yet for some reason in my little pea brain I am more impressed when you make other food into a sculpture. I don't know why.
I'm sorry. I something about the way you said that, where it's just like, apparently gingerbread has become a thing recently. I don't know who approved that. Whereas Kaylie's
how gingerbread is just this like, oh yeah, like we take this for granted that of course we can just build something with this food. That's its whole purpose, is to be building material.
Have you heard of this hot new thing called gingerbread? Apparently the kids are really into it.
Like Hansel and Gretel never existed.
No.
This woman in the woods just came up with this crazy idea to build her house.
Whoa! This woman made a house of food. You'll never believe how she did it. Ingredient number 3 will blow your mind.
But again, it's that like the contemporary depictions of that house are always using like the frickin' like Candyland, like the sides of the house are made of just giant gingerbread panels. So again, I say, to me, for some reason, it's more impressive when you build something out of anything but gingerbread.
So like houses? Like houses, like bricks.
No, but again,
are you like, whoa, crazy?
Food construction, though.
Oh, okay, it has to be food.
Yes, like
as if bricks aren't edible.
I mean, like, that's where most of my dietary fiber comes from.
Do I need to be concerned?
Honestly, Kaylee, like, he could eat an entire diet of bricks, and he probably still gets more vegetables than you do on the regular.
And that's a fact.
All that moss.
Got
all that
him.
algae.
All that moss.
Speaking of moss and algae, let's get on to today's topic. What do they have to do with each other? Absolutely nothing. I'm not as good at the segues as Bo is, but hey, you know, he's stuck in a parallel dimension right now where everything's trying to kill him. So he's a tad bit busy at the moment, trying not to, you know, get Final Destination recently.
I've got an idea for a transition though.
Okay.
So speaking of food, there is, shocker, get this, a cookbook. But not just any cookbook, mind you. A D&D themed recipes cookbook.
All right, that's like a standard deviation better than mine, but it's still not exactly optimal.
No, it's not good.
Today we are talking about TTRPGs, or as it's better known, TTRG, or however you pronounce that properly. I think I've only seen it written. I think that's the proper pronunciation for it.
TTRPGs.
Yes, we are talking about collaborative storytelling through the lens of tabletop role-playing games. What are tabletop role-playing games? Well, they're a lot of fun, that's one thing. But at a more concrete level, they are things like Dungeons and Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, Monster of the Week, where you have one person who is acting as the game master, helping to keep the story in focus, while everybody else is acting as a player who has an involvement in that story as one of the characters of that story. If I can ask real quick with the two of you, when did you first get into tabletop role-playing games? Like, how old were you? Where'd you first hear about them?
I mean, for me, I think it was this one. It was Ian that roped me into, and I also wanted to be a part of, because our other friends at the time were in a campaign like that you guys had started, and I wanted to be a part of it because the only other time I had played D&D was in high school with a group of friends where half of them wanted to treat it like with a little bit of lenience, like not full Monty Python shenanigans, but like wanted to have some fun with the campaign. The other half was like law abidant, like heavy Tolkien high fantasy, like we have to stick to all rules and customs. And I had never played anything like this, and I was just so scared out of my wits. I was like, I'm not having fun. This is stressful. I want to go home. It took a couple years to come back to it, but college was when I started getting a little bit more comfortable with it and actually enjoying myself at a certain point.
I think I killed you 3 times.
You did kill me 3 times. I had stopped enjoying it at that point, and then I started enjoying it a little bit later again, yeah.
And yet they're engaged. Isn't love a funny thing?
You killed me 3 times.
I only drowned you in a river, shattered you when you were made of ice, and then dropped you out of a tower. And I, like...
And lost my blunderbuss.
Oh, that was a good weapon that you lost. That was an unfortunate weapon to lose.
Boy, that was a real blunder. But Ian, that's Kaylie's, a little bit of Kaylie's background. After a bit of a rough start for her, how did you help encourage her to try out that game or get her into the world of tabletop role playing? Encourage
is an interesting word. I was just persistent.
Okay.
No,
I think it is a level of persistence. I think there's something to the idea that like you have to be willing to go, well, that was a part of my character that is gone.
Yeah.
I have to pick up the pieces and keep going. And if you can't do that, like maybe D&D, maybe you want something softer. And there are plenty of tabletop role-playing games that are better for that, but all of the ones that I play aren't.
Well, what did you start with though?
So I started with D&D. I started really in high school. It was an option though at most family Christmases. I remember my older cousins and my parents and uncles being very excited by D&D while I was not at that point because I was 7. I was like, sitting around and doing math? Ew, no.
Ew.
And then, when I fell in love with math,
Puberty is a strange thing, kids.
You see some numbers someday, and you're like, damn, I want this to be the rest of my life. And then I decided afterward, and then a little bit later, I went, actually, you know what? This is terrible. I hate this. I don't... What do you mean I have to prove that 2 equals 2? Thank you. Goodbye.
You didn't love math for the true personality. You just said, damn, that number is fine. Ooh.
Yeah, the shape of numbers is really what I... You see an 8, you see an infinity sign.
Oh, man, you're going to turn this into classic Howard Stern, where we're just describing the curves of something we really, really like. Like, have you ever seen one of those 6s before? The way it comes down and then comes back around like, hello, I missed you.
I'm sorry, do we need to make a math OnlyFans?
Absolutely.
Is that what I'm hearing?
But not only did you have the sexy subject of math going for you with D&D, you also, as long as I've known you, even before you were involved in it, have been a theater kid, as they say, which is
absolutely
a pretty big aspect of tabletop role-playing games, because whether you are the game master or whether you are one of the players, you're often going to take on a character, and you're often going to take part in a narrative without a script, typically. Was that aspect of it, the theatrical aspect, even more exciting for the both of you than Ian's fascination with sexy numbers?
I will say that as much as I love theater and as much as I love playing characters and having a good time, I think that the deeper concern perhaps is that I love putting people in situations where they have no control over anything and suffer. It has been a long time favorite of mine, and I know that makes me sound very sadistic.
No, you're a dungeon master. That's just a dungeon master right there.
It is really, really entertaining when you put nothing but a vase of flowers in a room and everyone goes, uh-oh.
Oh, shit.
What is that? It's like, it is a vase of flowers.
Oh, no, it's not.
No, it's not. It's a trap. I roll insight on the flowers. A natural 20. Tell me everything. What is the flower thinking?
They seem very friendly. They want to show you the
He said they
rules of the
seem.
game.
That doesn't mean they are. No, but I can imagine that's how you got attracted to the idea of being a game master or being a writer for these sorts of things. Kaylie, was that same thing attractive to you?
I think more for me, it was more of the character placement, because I have tried to think of how I would run a campaign, and my problem is I have a very hard time of creating without having pieces to already work with. And yes, there are books that guide you through like campaign creation, but like I am literally like, I need all of the pieces of like the thing that I want to do in front of me so I can collage it the way that I want it to look. And you can run a basic quest in that way, sure. But at this point, I've played with a lot of like Ian's campaigns or other of our friends who will run different stuff that I'm like, oh, but like I really like this thing and I want something like this. And sometimes I feel like there are some things that are just very cut and dry that I'm not super interested in. But it's hard for me to then go, all right, well, what do I want to do instead? So that's why I like doing the character side of things more, because I just get to have more of the improv-y fun of say yes and with the circumstances that somebody else has given me. And usually, like, again, if you have a fantastic DM, they're already talking to you as a player who's coming to the table going, what are you interested in? What's your background? Is there something you're particularly interested in doing with, like, related to your backstory? Or are you fresh off the boat and just kind of here to have a good time and you don't really have an attachment to this place? You just want to go kick some ass.
That's I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the main things I wanted to talk about today. What a lot of people may not know, if they're not familiar with games like Cthulhu or Dread or Dungeons and Dragons, is that it's not just a video game on paper. It's much more, I don't want to say freewheeling, but the possibilities are far less constrained there, because there's an aspect to this medium called collaborative storytelling. And that's all about, well, in some forms, it's more along the lines of everybody puts in an equal-ish measure, like if you're all writing an episode of TV or something. But for something like tabletop role-playing games, it can be something really different. When I say the term collaborative storytelling, what comes to mind? I'll go with Kaylie first.
I think of like describing, like, again, like D&D is a very main example that I think a lot of people are familiar with at this point because of media like Stranger Things, like repopularizing it, and Critical Role being something that has really gotten a little bit more into the public eye. But I think first of either just generic like we're in a battle, and so the GM will say, this happens, and then the players go, well, I do this. And so there's a lot more repertoire of back and forth. But I think of Monster of the Week, more specifically, as far as collaborative storytelling goes, because under that system, and similarly, I think to like Kids on Bikes, it's a lot more of like the GM will just sort of give you a like, all right, here's the sitch. And now you and your Mystery Inc. gang are the ones putting the pieces together and asking, you are the ones asking, okay, so if we know this and this, can we go here to see this? What if we try to set a trap and do this? Like, how do we get ourselves out of this? And it feels much more like in those games, the players are, without having left the table, the players are in like an imaginary escape room that the game master just kind of gets to sit there and watch them like puzzle it out.
And when you come up with something clever enough, they go, yeah, that works.
Yeah, no, and again, even if they may or may not like have thought of that ahead of time, if it's good enough, if they're into that idea, then like, great, yeah, let's run with that. And there's where the story changes.
I can't tell you how many times as a dungeon master or the keeper or whatever role I've played in the past, how many times I have been just tickled pink by something clever or creative that a player came up with where I just went, yeah, that works, even if it was completely off base. And you're certainly someone who can possibly relate to that idea, Ian, our great torture master over here.
Oh my God.
I wanted to ask you what collaborative storytelling means to you, especially since you are somebody who has written a story for our friend group when we played a Monster of the Week campaign. I want to hear it from your perspective as a narrative designer, as well as having been a player in some of our circumstances as well.
I feel as though you're giving me a lot of leeway into this, but
you're the guest. We're being nice.
That's so nice. Oh my goodness. I have fallen out of love with D&D for its like alternatives of Monster of the Week and stuff because of this idea of collaborative storytelling. Try as we might, D&D still does hold firm to this sort of, okay, and one person is talking the whole time, and then every now and then a decision is made.
It can be a very rigid system, especially because of how much of it is determined only by dice rolls. Like you as a player and even as a character can know everything in the world, let's say, about lockpicking, and you have centered your entire character around lockpicking. You are Key Boy. You are the
Key Boy.
Your character's name is the Tumbler Tickler or whatever, and you are the master of the lockpick. And if you have one bad roll on a 20-sided die, none of that matters whatsoever.
I
and
got
it's just
one little
done.
fight. My dice got scared.
And then the fucking giant-fingered barbarian just punches through it, and then you're just done. And it's like, cool, there goes my thing.
But of course, that is, to some extent, part of the failure of the D&D system, especially those that don't follow it all the time, which is that the dice roll is to be there when things can go wrong.
Right.
The idea that this dexterous rogue wouldn't be able to solve a lock because they rolled poorly is not where you should be situating it, and this is a whole tangent. But the idea that the rogue could do it in most scenarios, just do the 10-minute skill check. Like, it takes 10 minutes for them to solve the problem. They've solved the problem. There is no need for a dice roll.
True.
However, if you need that door unlocked immediately because there's a horde of orcs, that dice roll is everything that is out of your control. That is your adrenaline going. That is the toughness of the lock. That is you dropping tools. That is, where is my toolkit? We just got out of a fight. So it's all that stuff that compiles upon itself. That suddenly, when you're faced with that 2, when really you want that 18... you have a reason, because there was chaos.
True.
If you had had all the time in the world, you would have always been able to do this.
It can add to that storytelling aspect. It's a little twist. It's a little complication. It's a little difficulty right there.
which then allows the barbarian to come along and go, this isn't working, I'll punch the door in. Like we have to solve these problems differently when we are in chaos, rather than, oh, we have all the time in the world to sit here and think about this door in front of us.
I feel like we could go on for days about the problems and the positives of the D&D system, because who hates D&D more than D&D fans?
Well, and I was gonna say, like, I think the summary of those problems can be looked at between, again, Critical Role, which, you know, being sponsored heavily by Wizards of the Coast, is very adherent to the way that D&D is played by their rulebook, compared to the Adventure Zone, which after a certain point you can clearly tell when, as the Dungeon Master, Griffin sacrifices rules abiding for storytelling.
Very true.
And that's why I personally enjoy the Adventure Zone a lot more than Critical Role, because we get a really juicy story narrative out of gameplay, even though there are still moments kind of dictated by like game mechanics. That one shifts much more into using the game tools to just sort of generate, where do we go next? What's going on? What is about to go wrong or about to go very right?
But at the same time, comparing systems here and there as a means for storytelling, Ian, you were talking about how you have kind of shifted over time from a focus on Dungeons and Dragons as kind of your engine for storytelling versus something that's a little bit more a little bit more free form when it comes to the rigidity of the rules, as well as adherence to tradition and things that can give a little bit more leeway to players to help craft the narrative as well.
The Unreal Engine.
Tell me about your fascination with things like Monster of the Week or Dread.
So I absolutely adore Monster of the Week because so much of it comes into this options of storytelling. The dice are something that we rely on. The dice are something that do change what happens in the story, but it also gives the players a space to understand their own failure. If you think of such a role as like kick some ass, which is I'm going for this monster's gut with a sword. If you fail that, suddenly things go wrong. You're taking damage for sure, and then something worse is happening. But you as the player, along with the game master, get to decide what that is. You get to say, oh, well, because I was going for them with the gut, wouldn't it make more sense for me to take extra damage here? Versus a D&D role where it's, oh, you miss, and also
your bones break.
But at the same time, if it goes well, if you stab this monster in the gut, okay, you like what benefit does that give me? Well, because I was aiming for this exposed area of the monster, I could get extra damage. Whereas, you know, D&D doesn't necessarily have the same system of shifting that Monster of the Week allows. And especially, and just tell me when to stop, but the way that Monster of the Week specifically works to tell a story that we already know, which is the sort of like episodic, formulaic, this happens, then this happens, and then maybe a twist occurs, but inevitably it will resolve this way, means that we get to play with that system. Oh, we know we're in the investigation phase, so I can be looking for these clues where when we get to the later phase of this game, when we're in the midst of combat with the monster, if I didn't do that earlier stuff, we're all sort of boned, including the game master, because they want to help you, but they can't because you didn't find out what the monster's weakness was at any point.
Because it riffs a lot of, and allows you to riff on those tropes as well, from things like Supernatural, Buffy, Scooby-Doo, insert Doctor Who ? Like any weekly let's solve a mystery based television series. And they've added / fans have added a couple different styles of characters also based on like some of the other options that like weren't available originally with the game, where like We finally did get a meddling kid. I played the meddling kid, and I adore the meddling kid.
That was fun.
I think it's so fun. But like the original has a lot of the sort of like either skeptic / alien believer kind of that, like we get some nice Mulder and Scully kind of characters, as well as gunslinger kind of supernaturally Buffy kind of hunters.
And also the mundane, just a guy.
And and just a dude, which I appreciate.
I want to
just some dude.
I want to know, Ian, when you have written a narrative, or at least have a general idea of where you want to go in a campaign like this, how much do you end up deviating from original plans when it comes to your story? How much do you feel comfortable giving to players for them to have their own control? And how much do you want to reel back in yourself to say, okay, but we actually do need to do this one thing out of the 10 things that you've done differently?
So one of the things that I, again, love about Monster of the Week and similar formats is that it is less preparation for a game master, because for that, it was the way I did it, at least. It is, what is this monster? What is this monster trying to accomplish? And where is this sitting in this larger mystery that I want to weave? And especially with this idea of like, oh, I want there to be a sort of magical person that is trying to open a gate to hell, perhaps. And like, what would this next monster be doing for this person? What does that allow them to do? And so the good example is the mole men, where I was like, well, okay, I want there to be mole men in this town. That'd be funny. That'd be a fun thing.
There is no escape from the fortress of the moles.
But it's okay, so I have to set up why they're doing this. I have to set up what the monster is and what the weakness would be. And then it really is just sort of like in your hands of what you think is exciting and what you want to explore. And if things don't get explored, you have that sort of set of things that will get worse. It will get worse if you don't solve it in time. The idea that, just to keep going with Mole Men, because I love the Mole Men.
They were great.
The first murder is this woman that's on a run. Oh no, she's dead. If it's not solved, there's a race happening that day. There's a race going on. What could that mean for this race if there are these 3 monsters that are just out there trying to take down anybody that walks by?
Essentially, what you've done is you take a narrative element, you give players an element of risk and stakes, and you leave it up to them on a timescale basis as to how quickly they solve things. You let people know consequences that could occur, but you kind of leave it freely up to them as to how to solve the problems of that.
Absolutely.
Because if I remember correctly, I think half of our team was trying to get information about the crime scene, but then the other half of us, like, and not that you were trying to bait us purposefully with a red herring, because we eventually realized, oh no, this guy's kind of sketchy for just different reasons. But like, we split the team in 2 different directions and like didn't get like a whole lot of Mole Man information as quickly, because some of us were like distracted by the creepy old man that we were introduced to on our way to like the little town history building sort of thing. We're like, he seems suspicious.
Yeah.
And it's you are in control of the narrative as players versus, like, again, the TV programs where these tropes come from. They're still going to pilot towards the things of importance, but you as the audience are sitting there going, but that was so weird. If I were doing this, like, I'd be going to look for that. And, well, okay, you can, but is that the right choice right now?
That's a really interesting thing about tabletop RPGs, because for half of it, you are the character and you are part of the narrative element, but at the same time, often you are also the audience for that. If your character isn't directly involved in it, you're watching things go on, and then it's really out of your control because at any point the GM can just say, but you're not in the room. You can't help here right now. Your character isn't here right now. So you are both a participant and a passive actor there.
And I think the way that Monster of the Week helps that in some way is the idea that you are investigating something. And as much as we are an audience to our own actions at the table, we also have weird moments where we're like, I don't know where I'm supposed to go here. So you do wander around in the dark a little bit. Oh, well, this thing happened and there's a weird water elemental on the loose. No, it's not. It's not a water elemental, but the pipes were damaged, so we thought that for a long time. Let's go to some random dude's house.
I kind of, on that note, I wanted to bring Dread into the conversation.
Yes.
Because Dread is a very interesting one in where it, I think, functions similarly to Monster of the Week, where you are given a set of circumstances by your GM, and you kind of have to go, all right, I hope I can not die and finish this game in one piece. But there is something so much more horrifically dreadful, the name, when playing that at a certain point than playing like D&D or Monster of the Week because of the mechanics of the game itself, which would you like to quickly recap us?
It is your game.
Never played Dread. Yeah.
It's also a game that it's not my game, but it's also a game that I wrote about in the chapter for this victims role-playing game book,
which I would like to hear a lot more about, because it's always cool to have somebody on the pod that publishes something and does something other than just shit talk about, I don't know, Spider-Man or something for an hour and 10 minutes.
Let's not curse it by saying it's published, because it's not published yet, but we are all
Look,
fingers crossed.
I am not cursing you. I am manifesting for you. I am manifesting that you'll get that doctorate. I am manifesting that you will get that published. And I am manifesting that I will perform your wedding, goddammit, because the two of you are going to get hitched and I'm going to kill it at that. It's all about me and my tight five at your wedding ceremony.
We are man-fisting.
Yes, we are men-fisting.
But one of the things that I really do sort of stick to in this chapter is the way that items turn us into victims. I use a lot of object-oriented ontology and the idea of thing theory, specifically pulling from Bill Brown and Robin Bernstein's ideas of the way that objects become things. And that is when they switch around the subject-object idea of a person. So
think rubber. Think the idea that this is just a tire until suddenly this tire goes on a rampage.
Well, yes, but no. It's when we're using a knife in the kitchen, a chef uses a knife as a thing because it's become part of themselves. It is not only an object to be used, it is part of the chef's hand. It is the way that they maneuver themselves in the kitchen. Where somebody like you or me using a knife in the kitchen, it is obviously an object because we have no idea how to use a knife correctly, and it can very quickly become a thing when we cut ourselves with it.
Knives can smell fear, just like printers.
But they can. But this idea of thing theory is how I approach the idea of dice, of the tower of Jenga in Dread, and of candles in 10 Candles, and the way that these items become things because they endanger our characters in the game. And so, for Jenga, for Dread, the idea of the tower becomes a thing because your character's life is tied directly to its stability.
For folks who are unfamiliar, Dungeons and Dragons and Monster of the Week are role-playing games that typically take months and possibly years to tell a story.
It's been years!
Dread is a game that's typically played in one evening or so. And instead of using dice for rolls, if you say, I want to complete a task, I want to do this thing, your storyteller will say, pull one block from the Jenga tower. as the story progresses and naturally you start to build towards a climax and things get more intense, the Jenga tower gets way more wobbly because you're losing pieces and pieces and pieces, and fucking Jared will just take off the least optimal piece, which is meaningful to our world and not to the story world. But you know it's going to get your new favorite character killed immediately as soon as that one load-bearing block goes.
And it doesn't help when you're playing Dread on your spring break trip, when you're all just a wee bit, perhaps, too tipsy
A wee bit?
to keep
A wee
to
bit?
keep a table stable enough to hold a tower.
It's an extra level of intensity.
I know, that's one way to add some extra intensity to your game. Just take a couple shots beforehand, see how well you can pull Jenga blocks.
Surprisingly well, all of you. As the person speaking who never had to pull them, you all do really well drunk, and it really throws off my narrative arc.
We do very well at pulls, but then we just make stupid decisions about what to do next after we succeed.
Accurate. We min-maxed dex and dumped intelligence. But when it comes to something like what you were talking about with your chapter, do you feel that those elements can hinder storytelling sometimes if you've got a narrative that you want to go with and somebody just like makes one bad pull from a tower or has one bad dice roll or something like that?
I love him to death. Or somebody tries to bring hentai and furry monsters
That's true.
into the game.
That was a different game, dear.
No, that was a different game, but thinking of things where it's like, oh dear, how does the rest of the party feel about this all of a sudden?
When there's something that happens that's completely off kilter for your plans and your ideas and all that, is it easy just to accept that, or do you just have to scream into the void for a few minutes there?
I do think Dread is a very limited system in that way, because it does sort of require a game master to railroad pretty harshly. Because again, when you only have 3 to 4 hours to play this game versus 2 hours over the course of 4 years, twice a week, sort of like it's a different time scale. If you're trying to tell a tight story with other people in the room, you do have to go, and then the monster appears now.
Yep.
There's no like, oh, I'm going to just avoid the adventure, because guess what? The adventure's coming to get you.
The prophecy has been foretold.
I'm coming for your left shoe, buddy, and I'm shitting in him.
Now that would be a good monster right there. So when it comes to the idea of railroading, and for those who aren't as familiar with that idea,
it is not about trains.
But at the same time, it is about trains.
Because you got to stay on track there. Can you guys describe to me what railroading is and how that can be detrimental?
I think one of the really problematic things is that you do at some point feel as a player like, well, did my decisions actually matter?
Mm-hmm.
If I was given 3 doors, but I was always going to end up in the same room, did my decision matter? And I think that's one of the key problems that people really like about role-playing games, is that it's supposed to be about your decision mattering. In this moment, in this context, my decision is supposed to impact the world, which is something you don't always get to say in real life.
Yeah. Yes. Just because I decided today to have Taco Bell instead of Burger King does not mean that like a little telltale message will just be like, the king will remember that.
You don't get those?
I know he's watching.
I get the Xbox achievement unlocked ones.
I'm all platinum when it comes to my Taco Bell speed run.
I've done a complete collectionist route of acquiring knickknacks, but I have yet to fill out my I don't know where I'm going with this. Anyway,
the metaphor.
The metaphor is lost. I haven't completed my metaphor collectathon.
You should watch Summoning Salt on his metaphor speed run.
No, but railroading is so difficult sometimes because I, as a player, having been at the table that that Ian is leading and watching our friends get incredibly out of hand sometimes, I sit there going, I would not know how to accommodate the weird ass places that they just decide to go to. That like we've kind of made a works close enough-ish homebrew for shop behavior, but it used to be a running joke where every time we were ready to wrap up a campaign, we'd be like, is there a shop nearby? What catches my eye? And expect Ian to fill in the blanks. That like if I were in that position, I would be like, I don't like, it's either not going to be good or I'm not going to have an answer. And like I like railroading. I like making the sort of like choose your own adventure tree. Like I like being able to go, okay, there are choices, but I know where each route is going to go. And I can re-navigate from one slot to another slot if it can make sense.
I've definitely been there before as well. And I'm interested to know I'll ask this from the perspective of being a player and from being the perspective of a game master, if you've had an experience with that. What was the coolest idea that a player came up with that changed, at least briefly, the course of the story? It could be something small that led to a one-off kind of episode of an arc. It could be something that had a giant impact across the entire story. And is it Stephen the Guard, Kaylie? Is it Stephen?
No, this is one of our dear friends who we mention on here quite a lot, deciding that his character's goal in life was to party for 48 hours straight and that it would like fulfill his destiny and some shit. But this is a goal that's like over the course of your entire adventure, this is what you're going to try to set out to do to like achieve a personal goal for your character. And like a handful of sessions in, we were waiting for the right timing for like other pieces of plot. This man's just goes, all right, we're doing this. And so one entire session of gameplay became Ian like narrating the course of this attempted 48-hour party, which spoilers, we made it to 47 and a half hours. No. It was so sad. But it's because it was so early in the campaign that we're like, we can't let them finish this. That's the whole point of having this be a long-term goal. But we spent an entire session navigating a tavern/house party that this man had thrown as he was trying to sleep with the cake, the magical cakes sales lady.
That sounds about right.
And it was a disaster, but it was hysterical.
It can be so much more entertaining when everything goes wrong versus when everything just goes as expected.
Because at least you did give us the task of he's getting so distracted because he's so drunk that if he falls asleep, this whole thing is for naught. So the rest of the players, we were kind of tasked with keeping the party alive so that hopefully by the end of this, we could say that we had done it. Like that we wouldn't have to do this again.
Pretty brilliant of me, actually. I forgot about that part.
Oh, yeah, no, that was like, we were, it was like, it felt kind of like those sandwich stacker games of like, we are trying to keep this whole thing from coming down on us. And it still did. And we destroyed the tavern on accident.
Yeah, and you owed him like 10,000
Yeah,
gold.
we put a hole in his second floor. It was not good.
Yeah, it was expensive.
The same question for you, Ian. What's been one of the most satisfying things for you, either as a player or as a game master, when it came to somebody throwing either a wrench in the plan or coming up with something and it just snowballs into something else that you never expected?
So I will talk about Stephen the Guard. Because
Stephen!
The classic joke character of, I didn't have a plan for this character. he's just a guy, but now everybody of the party loves him.
Because and it's perhaps a critical part of myself that I should explore, but I am perfectly okay with just cannon fodder guards to be slaughtered. Like, sure, they're people, but also they're not. I don't care. They're not. They're guards.
Stephen the guard
Okay,
isn't going to
great.
kill the dragon.
Yeah, it's not going to be Stephen the guard.
Unless he does.
No, he's...
But at the same time, it's something that my players have thought about. And maybe we're the bad guys in this situation, which for my campaigns is generally not true. I'm like, no, you're the good guys, otherwise why would we be here? But for this moment, they went to a factory, they got lied to by the person like in charge of this factory,
Mm-hmm.
and they went, oh, well then we'll take one of your guards with us to like get this cleared up with the person that sent us to kill you. And the person in charge of the factory was like, that's a great idea. I love that. Here, take this guard. And they walk back to the city, away from the factory. On the course, they decide to make small talk. Well, what's your name? Oh, I'm Stephen the guard.
We've all known that voice of the DM was not expecting this character to be important outside of just the element of plot. And then characters and players just start asking lots and lots of questions, and you just gotta bullshit it real fast because they're like, all right, come on, dance, monkey, dance.
And you know what? Stephen made it all the way to the like main boss's like office, who then was like, why have you not killed this person? They were like, well, we brought along Stephen here. So who the hell is Stephen? And then, of course, Dylan playing as Dalen, I believe. In
that was
campaign,
Dalen.
Oh, clever name.
turns to Stephen and goes, Stephen, you have to show us your official guard badge, and rolls a nat 20 on intimidation. And I just killed Stephen
Seppuku.
with a suicide attempt because I was like, I don't know where to go with this plot line. And I also don't want Stephen in jail for the rest of the campaign. So it's just one more carcass for the fire.
Man's intimidated him to his own demise.
Mm.
It was scarring.
I don't have an answer. Oh.
But then we fast forward through the rest of the campaign, and Stephen comes back as like a lich boss in the underworld.
No.
He was a minion. He was a minion.
He was
of
a
the
mi-
lich
yeah.
boss. He was not one of the lich bosses.
He should have
He's
been the
not
big
that
bad
important.
evil guy. He should have been the final boss.
No, I already had that.
But just the fact that he made a reappearance was enough for us.
How do you have elements like that inside of a dramatic or adventure themed story become very comedic very fast without that overtaking the tone of the overall story?
You ask that as though it doesn't. As if the comedic tone wasn't the thing from the beginning.
Good point.
I think, and it's part of the like upbringing of being raised to some extent on Monty Python and on this sort of very dry British humor and very like, and now comedy. So like everything has that tinge to it because I don't really know how to want people to sit in like gothic horror or gory horror or any sort of just like, we're in high fantasy land and I'm the bar maiden who has come to deliver your drinks without being like, hey, you got your drinks. Bye.
Push up your cuff, Governor. What you want today? I've got bread. I've got cheese.
It's a naturally silly thing right there. Like, Kaylie and I can definitely say that we've had a lot of serious moments of drama and role play in a campaign, but like you only earn those like 15 episodes at minimum into a like 20 episode campaign once you learn who your characters are as well as their backstories, their motivations, things like that, which contribute to the overall narrative, but it's really tough to get people focused and ready to suspend their disbelief and really give into it. Like, Kaylie, what are some of the big narrative moments that when we've played Dread and Dungeons and Dragons and Monster of the Week, what are some of those that speak to you that are more player driven than game master driven?
I really think like the one that finally like blew my mind in a way of like how I didn't expect to get to that place with a character, because I am not the one who comes with pages and pages of backstory to the table. I am not that kind of girl. Sorry. I honestly, like, hats off to anybody who's like, without even playing this game, I already know this character inside and out, and I am still going to keep learning more as we are playing. I'm like, kudos to you. I'm just here to have a good time, and I will figure it out along the way.
Yeah.
But playing Monster of the Week as the meddling kid, as Agnes.
In my campaign.
Yes. Having moments, because she's a kid, getting involved with shit way beyond, like, what she should be. There were so many wonderful moments that Gibby brought in where, like, and now I have to go home. I have to sneak back home, and my mom is not happy with me. And we would have these, like, they started kind of awkward or just like, oh, yeah, little, like, teenage girl trying to, like, avoid trouble. Like, sorry, mom, like, you were at work. I ran to a friend's house. Yeah, that's totally what happened. Bye. Moving from that to, like, actual, like, really beautiful, like, heart-to-heart moments, and then plot twist finding out that my mom was actually a part of this organization, like, before, like when she'd married my character's dad, and, like, it was this whole backstory spy thing that I was like, oh, wow, what? And then suddenly having her as an NPC to bring into some of the final fights, it was this, like, deeply, like, connected moment of character that I was not expecting to get out of that campaign, and it has stuck with me since.
I'm really happy to hear that. One, so I can toot my own horn. It's a audio medium.
Y'all
in
are
podcasting.
good DMs.
It's an audio medium, but you can't see that I'm dabbing like it's 2015 right here. It's exceptional.
He's dabbing so hard. Oh no, now Ian's doing it. Oh god, now I'm doing it. Help.
But I, as a writer in that circumstance, I had not planned any of that until maybe the, like, second or third time that we had played out one of those scenes between mysteries, because I thought it would just be a situation of adding some, like, levity to the situation that, hey, you're coming back from a big monster hunt right here. You're also 14. Here's a scene with your, like, mom who's been working too long at the legal office. I didn't come up with any of that. We
ended the session before with we get back on the bus back home, and I finally have cell service. You look, 15 missed calls from mom. And, like, that was how we ended the session. And I went, oh no!
There's so many things that I, as a DM for Dungeons and Dragons and for Monster of the Week, come up with, but there's so many more things in the end result that I end up incorporating into the story once I hear from my players. When I focus on what's really exciting them versus just what I want to happen, I try to focus so much more on what's going to engage them, not just as players, but also as an audience and everything. And finding out what that is without revealing the whole story can be really fucking tough sometimes, because in my early days as a DM, I'd just be like, oh, they're going to love this. They're absolutely going to flip their biscuits about this. But, like, all of them are thinking about, what happened to Boblin the Goblin? That's what we're really into right now. It's cool that, like, the King's ghost is here and, like, is, like, giving us quests and shit, but I'm all about Starla the bartender. I'm all about Grundle, the beheaded orc head who is rolling around in a suit of animated armor right now. That's who I actually want to pay attention to. Like,
we in the same 48-hour party campaign, we ended up falling in love with a kobold cult that just wanted candles.
Yep.
And our
Stolen
friend
straight from World of Warcraft. But
yeah. Stolen straight from World of Warcraft, but also our friend who, like, their character who had lived in the town kind of as a ruffian was like, oh yeah, I know a guy. Who? Light McStick. And you know, when the town accidentally, that may or may not have been due to our negligence, burned down, guess who we made sure got out? Light McStick.
I don't care if I don't get anybody else out. I'm not leaving that man behind right there.
it was due to negligence. But
We botched an assassination, okay?
But I think that goes back to the earlier point we were making about like collaborative storytelling.
Mhm.
One of the learning hurdles is that as a game master, you're not trying to tell your story, you're trying to tell your player's story.
Right.
So when you do this, like, and now here is this thing, it's like, okay, but does this matter to any of us?
Yeah.
Do we care?
Yeah.
No, I'm on my quest to try to find, like, the Holy Grail for my grandmother or something, whatever my backstory is. I don't care about this Ghost King. Who cares?
Exactly. Like, you have to sprinkle in a lot when it comes to things that interest players as a group and things that interest players as individuals, so that not only does the group's story as a party get told, you also are able to tell the story of characters as individuals, because it's really important that everybody gets a moment to shine there. So, like, you have a general overall narrative, but I think in the same way that you were talking about how you love making it so that the players are completely out of control, I think there's a flip side to that, in that you as a game master are also at the mercy of your own players to engage with the narrative set pieces that you come up with, or you're also at the mercy of them saying, I'm gonna go fight an owl bear with one hand behind my back tied up. Let's see how this goes.
Those are my favorite because that's yeah, let's see how this goes. I am not the like, oh no, baby, we'll redirect you into the plot. It's like, oh, you want to go to the evil haunted castle that's run by owl bears? We can go there. We can go there now. I have a button.
Then why won't you let me just go and fight the final boss as my new character, Gordon? He's a little pumpkin boy and he's never taken damage. Therefore, he's invincible.
Send Gordon into the pit.
I have not stopped you. It has been your fellow players that have stopped you.
I have the confidence of like a 50-year-old white man in the body of a 10-year-old vegetable boy who summons knives. And my thing is that as a player, I tend to railroad on behalf of the DM. Not usually because they actually asked me to do it, but because I'm just like, I've been here before. I too would want my actual story to get played out here. And as much as I want to like have that desire to steal everything that I can because he's a steely little boy and he likes to steal things for fun, I also recognize I should come up with a motivation for this character to participate in the plot so that we can keep it moving here and there.
But I think that's part of the give and take.
Yeah.
There's such a relationship between I am the person that is telling the story versus I am the person that is in the story.
True.
So if I don't like the story that you're telling, it's my prerogative to go, and I am leaving this story. I want to do something else.
It's the Stanley Parable.
Mhm.
It's you can follow where you expect the railroad to go, or like, even if it's not the railroad, it's close enough.
Yeah.
Or you literally can just go, no, and it's your problem. And hopefully if you're doing that, you're not being a complete ass,
Yeah.
like just walking away from the plot and the game that your DM is trying to give you.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's a little fun to keep them on their toes of like, clearly we're going to this spooky, dark, scary cave to cut off the baddies. So what if we just follow directly behind them the entire time?
They have true sight. They have blind sight. They know you're...
Not take the shortcut? No. Let's go the long way.
No, that's... It's a extremely difficult balance. Speaking about it from the perspective of having been storyteller and a player there, when it hits, it is absolutely incredible, but it takes so much practice to nail that collaborative balance of both parties feeling satisfied by the transaction there. Like it's incredibly difficult, but so rewarding.
I'm just sad that my little gnome who wanted to be a dread pirate never got her ship.
I had such a plan for
I know
that,
you
too.
had a plan for her too.
I had a whole underground prison, underwater prison a la Marvel, and like there's some ancient gods there. You weren't getting there for a while, but you know, there were
Damn.
pirate ships there.
My ship.
As long as everybody's satisfied and had a good time at the end of the day with your buds around a table with a bunch of dice and way too much booze or snacks that you've definitely spent too much on, that's what really matters.
And also way too many dice that you just hold in your hands and click clack.
Click, clack, rock, click,
the
clack.
entire time.
We are the dice goblins.
The dice.
That is going to be our episode for today. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at LibArtistsPod. We'd like to thank Ian for joining us on this episode as well. Ian, where can we find you online on the grand scheme of the interwebs?
If you really like me, you're just like, wow, I want more of Ian, you could go to my new Play Exchange account if you have that. You could see my plays.
Ooh!
I'm Ian Downs. I have a new Play Exchange.
You're also on Twitter.
Yeah, but I don't tweet anything.
Join us next time when Bo returns from the madness of the multiverse.
He's actually just been on a side quest this entire time. We're just stalling for him.
He's actually been wearing an Ian costume. Pull off his mask, Kaylie. Pull off the mask and find out. Peace.
The Liberal Artists Podcast premieres every other Thursday on your favourite podcasting platform. The show is hosted by Bodhi Opapula, Kaylee Horowitz, and Andy Gibson. You can find the show at LibArtistsPod on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks to White Hot for performing the theme song Reflect, which can be found on freebeats.io. Now, I'm off to go exploring, and maybe, just maybe, I'll find a sheep that I can call my own. Good day.
You know what I'm going to do as your wedding presentation for the ceremony?
Oh, God.
I'm just going to bring up a boombox with an MP3 loaded on it, and it's just this episode, and we're just going to stand there for an hour and 15 minutes, and I'm going to stare blankly.
We're not allowed to play like a game of D&D or something as it's happening, or like Dread. I don't know. What's a good game for a wedding?
If anybody even speaks up and says anything, I'm just going to frown and shake my head at them.
Restart the episode every time somebody talks.